Steambot Chronicles Battle Tournament is a stripped-down albeit competent rendition of the PlayStation 2 classic. It all revolves around bipedal mechs and sees the player taking on the role of a customizable avatar as they make their way through the world. One of the most impressive aspects of the game has to be its open-ended nature. The main city is surprisingly large and is home to a whole cast of lovable NPCs that help flesh out the narrative. This location serves as the game's hub, and from here you can upgrade your machine with various parts that enhance its abilities and even fully customize its appearance. You can also take on a variety of missions, and this is where Steambot begins to shine. The amount of diversity in the tasks you can take on is a real standout. One of the main attractions is the tournament mode that sees you facing off against other pilots as you slowly climb the ranks and ultimately achieve fame with each and every win. It's a really addictive system. Unfortunately, it's not all sunshine and rainbows. Due to the lack of a second analog stick, it can take quite a while to get used to the control setup, but after some time with the game, it soon becomes second nature. It doesn't break the deal, but it's certainly something that needs mentioning. Although it never quite reaches the highs of the PS2 version, it's still well worth picking up. Crimson Gem Saga is an often overlooked RPG that unfortunately never received the attention it deserved. The PSP was a literal RPG machine, so it's not surprising that some games fell through the cracks, with Crimson being one of them. Now, the first detail that many players will pick up on is the incredible art style that brings the events of the adventure to life. Each and every location, NPC and character you encounter throughout the journey is all presented in a rich and vibrant manner. Complementing the impressive visuals is a well thought out and robust battling system that is turn-based in nature. Naturally, it extends a whole range of both physical and magic-based abilities to the player, and all relies upon your character's progression, which is tied to a skill tree system. As you progress and earn experience, you can make your way through the tree and ultimately build a character that plays to your strengths. There's a ton of options as well, which makes subsequent playthroughs all the more enjoyable. Although it's nowhere near the best RPG on the system by any means, Crimson Gem Saga is still a proficient RPG that will likely satisfy longtime fans and also offer something accessible for newcomers to try out. The PSP was a real heavyweight when it came to puzzlers, with the likes of Echochrome and Mercury Meltdown having a huge impact on the handheld. But like most consoles, many games fade into the ether, and one of those has to be a little game known as Exit. Now, the experience is split up into 10 separate levels, with each of them having 10 different sections of increasing difficulty within them. You fill the shoes of Mr. Escape as you explore each of them, with the goal being to ultimately save the people trapped within them. Now, as with most puzzle games, the gameplay has the potential to get quite frustrating as you advance, but if you pay close attention to the mechanics in play, it soon becomes the best aspect of the adventure. You've got several abilities at your side, such as running and jumping, that at first will take a while to get used to thanks to the somewhat strange timing that the actions require, but soon you'll find yourself climbing ropes and descending ladders, crawling through tight spaces as the room fills with smoke, all in the aim of beating the clock and helping those that are in need. Despite its flaws, Exit is a solid puzzle game that is bound to satisfy fans of the genre, but will likely frustrate those who don't have the patience to get to grips with its unconventional setup. The PSP is home to a range of solid platformers, but one that often got overlooked was Backbone's Death Jr. As the player, you fill the role of DJ, who is essentially the son of Death. After a school trip takes a wrong turn and an evil menace is brought into the world, he's plunged into an adventure that sees him and many like-minded heroes setting out to close all of the portals they accidentally opened. It shares much in common with the likes of Super Mario 64, with the museum they visited on the trip serving as a sort of hub area. Each portal you travel through takes you to a different level, with each of them offering up their own distinct flavour as well as difficulty. There's quite a few objectives to complete throughout these locations. Most of them just involve taking out monsters with your guns or your scythe, and after defeating the monsters you advance to a new section. There's a sincere level of charm that permeates throughout the entire game. May it be the minute-to-minute gameplay or the humorous cutscenes, there is nothing quite like it. Bounty Hounds is an action role-playing game that puts players into the role of a man known as Maximilian. You set out to explore new worlds with the hopes of terraforming them into habitable environments for various colonies to eventually populate. The gameplay presented is essentially that of a hack and slash, which all revolves around the use of a wide array of weaponry. From swords to maces and guns, there's plenty of diversity when it comes to taking on the slew of enemies. The best thing about them is that they can all be modified as well, with various elemental and status affecting abilities. There's a serious amount to play around with, and progressing through the adventure unlocks even more and more options, which helps the combat slowly become the best aspect of the game. Now, character progression also plays a huge role. Naturally, upon defeating enemies you receive experience points which can then be used to upgrade max. They're not trivial either, as each of them have a noticeable effect on the battlefield. Now, the only downside to bounty hounds is the lack of an in-depth tutorial, which may leave some players wondering what the hell is going on, but thankfully there's some handy guides on the web that make this shortcoming all the more passable. If you never managed to play it, Bounty Hounds is well worth a go. With the likes of Grand Theft Auto appearing on the PSP, it was always going to be a hard job for any competitors who decided to have a go. Gangs of London is a free-roam sandbox brought to us by the same team that was behind The Getaway on the PS2. But unlike The Getaway games, where the story was an integral part of the experience, Gangs of London has a paper-thin narrative. The plot essentially sees your gang conquering all of London and wiping out your rivals. There's a handful of groups to choose from to ensure a different story based on whichever one you picked, which does add to the overall replay value nicely. However, the story parts are short 30-second bookends between missions, some of which prove to be quite humorous but never nothing to write home about. What makes Gangs of London excel is the gameplay, providing you can get your head around the severely limited control setup thanks to the lack of a second analog stick. The campaign mode offers a wide variety of objectives. The driving missions usually involve driving from point A to B, perhaps ramming somebody off the road, or trying to get away from someone trying to run you off the road, or performing standard delivery and combat missions, where you're tasked with taking everybody out. There are a few others that help mix it up further, but the most fun can be had during the free roam sections that allow you to engage in total mayhem. Gangs of London is nowhere near the best free roamer on the PSP, but one that still deserves a look. Radiant Mythology uses many characters from previous Tales games and places them into an all-new story featuring a new hero, which is you. Your avatar is a person born from the Mana Tree, and with the help of a flying cat named Momo, you have to find a way to stop the planet-eating being known as the Devourer. Along the way, you'll find yourself meeting up with various lovable NPCs, but for the most part, the quality of the story itself is quite mediocre and somewhat predictable at times. Gameplay-wise, if you're familiar with the series, the engaging and robust combat system takes center stage and offers up a whole host of skills and abilities for the player to utilize. If used properly, your skills can be chained together to make long, damaging combos, and if timed right, can link up with the attacks of other party members to combo for even more hits and damage. There's a huge variety of classes and customization options that can help you improve your character as well, and with the massive number of side quests, you'll slowly unlock more and more options as you progress. These options truly increase the replayability and length of the game by a good amount. Now, don't go into this game expecting a story on the caliber of the console titles, as you will be very disappointed. However, if you go into it realizing it to be a dungeon crawler where you can thoroughly develop your character, you will probably enjoy it quite a bit. Rengoku 2 introduces players to a world where androids have become the standard means in which to wage war. The adventure follows one of these robots who has managed to attain self-awareness and as a result has an undying urge to not only learn more about itself, but the world that surrounds it. Now, the story won't keep you on the edge of your seat, but it does offer up a meaningful narrative that is ultimately worth playing through. On the gameplay front, it's a rather unique setup as well, with each face button on the PSP corresponding with one of the robot's limbs, which can all be fully customized with a wide range of weaponry and items that opens up the adventure to many different playstyles. And this is where half of the fun that Rengoku offers lies. Figuring out which set works best for yourself will see the gameplay constantly changing and as a result never becoming stale as more upgrades are dealt out. Now, it won't be for everyone. The somewhat dark and somber nature of the experience may have the potential to turn some players away, but in my opinion, it offers up one of the best outings available on the PSP. Black Rock Shooter lends much from the manga series that it's based upon and sees you having to overcome an alien invasion that has completely ravaged the world, as the chances of humanity's survival slowly dwindle into non-existence. Now the gameplay is largely split up into a generous amount of different missions, all with a diverse set of objectives to complete, but the most frequent type sees you taking on several enemies at once as you utilize the deep and engaging battle system the game provides. As you would expect, there's a ton of options at your fingertips, with the main one being the use of your rock cannon that over the course of the game sees a whole slew of upgrades and tweaks thanks to the leveling up system. But just as important as going on the offensive is, defense also plays a huge role, and with the onslaught of enemies that come your way, it's a good idea to invest early on. As standard, you possess a block as well as a handy sidestep to avoid incoming attacks completely, but these actions do not come without consequence. If you time it incorrectly, it's lights up. There's a real sense of risk versus reward when it comes to the system, and I for one think it helps it stand out amongst the sea of competitors on the market. Although Black Rock Shooter is not perfect, it still manages to offer up a competent action RPG for players to sink their teeth into. Key of Heaven is one of the most impressive and largely forgotten games on the PSP. It's essentially an Oriental-themed action RPG that sees 5 different clans throughout the kingdom battling for the possession of power over the region. The main protagonist, Shimbu, is part of one of these clans and is tasked with retrieving several swords from each of the clans. Naturally, throughout the adventure, you'll find yourself encountering a wide selection of enemies, acquiring an array of items through exploration or the vigorous economy system, and finally leveling up and upgrading the sizable amount of weapons and martial art techniques you can learn. This is where Key of Heaven truly comes into its own. The battling system is surprisingly deep and offers up a serious amount of options, from chaining combos to executing special abilities that you learn through collecting scrolls scattered throughout the world. There's a generous amount to collect as well, and acquiring all of them is no mere feat. If it passed you by, Key of Heaven is one game that I can fully recommend you pick up and play. Well, that does it for today's video. Don't forget to hit subscribe and follow me on all of the socials to stay up to date on future videos and to take part in giveaways. You can also join our growing community on Discord and meet many like-minded gamers to continue the conversation with. I'd also like to give a special shout out to our Patreon supporters Rhino, Skill Jim, Nano, Steve and Paddy J for their continued support that helps make these videos possible. If you're interested in joining our Discord or supporting the channel through Patreon, you'll find the links in the description. As always, thanks for taking the time to watch the video. I'll catch you next time.